Good morning and welcome. I'm thrilled this morning to have with me Chris Tinsley, who we are very proud is one of our alumni and who is from AvidXchange. And in terms of introduction, I'm going to let Chris tell us much more about his who he is, how he got to UNC Charlotte, and what he does at AvidXchange.
Perfect. Good morning. Thanks for inviting me into the conversation. Chris Tinsley, I'm one of the co-founders at AvidXchange. We started the company in 2000, and it was, a chance meeting with Mike Prager, our CEO, and just a relationship kind of built over time. And we ended up he asked me to join the company. And I joined as the chief technology officer and been doing that for 20 years now. So we always thought it was going to be a 2-year journey, and here we are 20 years later. But the company's done, I feel, quite fortunate to have been part of the experiment. And the experiment continues. We're growing at a rapid pace. My role's changed a little bit over time, but still functioning kind of as a chief technology officer deep in the fintech space, and it's a lot of fun. So just to kind of back up a little bit and give a little bit of intro to my UNCC days, I didn't have a traditional college entrance. I kind of exited high school a little bit in a tailspin, not sure what I wanted to do. So had a false start, went to a college for one semester, kind of had a realization I wasn't quite ready and needed a little bit more maturity. And so probably didn't think about it that way back then, but I realized military was a good option for me. So 18, I signed up. This was probably 1990. So if you were around of age that point in time, you probably remember Desert Storm, kind of that was going on at the same time. And so I thought that would be something interesting to get involved in, and kind of naive, but joined the military, enlisted, spent 3 years getting the equivalent of, electrical engineering background and avionics, and then was fortunate enough to get selected for an officer accession program and started that program at the U.S. Naval Academy. Had a realization, though, as I was going through that program, a really good computer science program, focus on robotics, and the program was intense. It was a really good program, but I think I had a realization halfway through that I'd already spent 5 years of my life kind of in a military setting, and I was looking at another 8 and kind of had a change of heart. And so exited the military, and my wife and I met, or my future wife and I met. So my fiance, we moved around the country trying to figure out where we wanted to be. And then she's from Charlotte. I wasn't from Charlotte. I was from Western North Carolina, but her father became very ill. And so we made a tough decision to move in with them and kind of help her family through that process. And I was trying to figure out where to finish my school at that point in time. So had a lot of options. I was applying all over the place. And at the end of the day, I visited the campus. I met some of the folks, and I felt like they had what I needed. And, a lot of people get caught up in the school status and where you go, but I felt like UNCC was a good place for me to kind of settle in. And I think, I learned a lot about the difference between a military and a civilian setting, but I think looking back, it was probably one of the best decisions I made. Had I not made that decision, I wouldn't have made the contacts in Charlotte, probably wouldn't have met Mike Prager, and wouldn't have been kind of engaged in AvidXchange. So I think one of the benefits of UNC Charlotte is just the location. You're in one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and it's easy to make connections there. So I don't know if that was what we were targeting, but that's kind of the background.
This is great, Chris. I love hearing these stories. And as I talk with several of our very successful alumni, I'm always fascinated by how almost every single one of them mentions their non-traditional route. The fact that as they were going through it, it wasn't clear in their mind that yes, I'm successful, I'm gonna make it, but they persist and they go through the scenic route, as I call it. And that's really what makes for such a rich personality and rich background. And again, we still refer to them as non-traditional students, but really they become the majority of our students, and we're very proud of that. And in that respect, I think for our students to hear stories like this, it's the most inspiring thing. So the other aspect of this is the entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And I know our students listening to this, at least every student who comes into computing, they imagine themselves graduating and going into the likes of Google, Facebook, etc.
Right.
Yet we have quite a few very successful entrepreneurs, such as yourself, who decide to take a different route. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What led you to jump into this scary thing, the adventure of creating your own business?
Great question. I can, honestly, I'll say it's not for everybody. I had, when I had the epiphany that I didn't want to spend the rest of my time in the military, I do think I had built an appetite for adventure, I guess is the only way to classify it. And the thought of kind of going into a well-established, large publicly traded company, I really just, it didn't feel right to me. And I've always enjoyed kind of getting into something that's a little bit chaotic and starting to figure out how to bring some normalcy to it. And so if you were working in the 90s and in the tech space, it was a really crazy time. We had software companies that were starting up, entrepreneurs. They had business models that really had not been established, and they were able to go public and get these really ridiculous valuations. I think most everybody understood that it probably couldn't last, or at least the well-established people who studied markets. But as somebody that had just graduated with a computer science degree, it was like, for me, I couldn't look away. I had to do it. And so it was just about trying to find that right entrepreneurial network and finding a way to tap into people who knew what they were doing. And Charlotte has these networks. They were just starting in the 90s, but there used to be a YEO, or an EO is what's out there now. But that was a network that I ended up establishing some connections in, and that's how I met Mike Prager. He's a serial entrepreneur. He had already built a couple of companies prior to AvidXchange. And, I met him, and I liked his way of thinking. And, David Miller was another entrepreneur that was starting it with him. And so the two of them really helped me kind of get excited about the potential. And that's what I bought into. And I think I kept, it is crazy because you're probably going to take less compensation in a startup, but you're going to get massive amount of experience. You're not just going to have one job. You're going to have 20 jobs, and you're going to be working long hours. And so that, to some people, just seems like it's not worth it. But, I can tell you that if you apply yourself and you really dig in, the amount of the value you can generate out of that far surpasses what you can gain from, a higher salary. And that's the way, I think I was maybe a little naive in the beginning, but that's the way I look at it now. And I wouldn't trade it, for anything. I think the experience has been well worth the hard work. And I just don't know how I would have built the experience base if I just had kind of a contained job that doesn't change rapidly on a day-to-day basis. I think, it could go either way. I mean, it took 20 years to get to where we are, and I kept telling myself it's only 2 more years. It's only 2 more years. So in a way, I kind of just kept mentally tricking myself to think, okay, it gets easier around the corner. And I guess I'm a little bit, I kind of enjoy that hard work and just digging in and expanding my knowledge base, constantly. So I think if I could give advice to students, don't wait until you graduate to start really going above and beyond and applying yourself. You've got to embrace the degree that you're working on and just go above and beyond. And the more you can learn now, it sets that foundation up to really get you ready for whatever you do. But especially if you go into an entrepreneurial setting, you're not going to have time to sit down and go back and study how to build software foundations. You're going to be under a lot of pressure to produce. And so I think take advantage of the time you have now. It may not seem like you have a lot of time, but trust me, you have a lot of time right now, and take advantage of it.
So AvidXchange is your baby, and you just turned 20.
Yeah.
Tell us more about it.
That's, we started the company. I think there were 5 co-founders that were kind of in that entrepreneurial world that said, hey, let's shut down what we're doing and work on this. I was just getting started trying to build a consulting business with software engineering, and had decided when Mike and David pitched the idea that I'd rather be part of this because it looks like it's going to be much bigger than what I could do on my own. And so it was just five guys in the beginning. We lost the other co-founders. Mike and I are the two survivors out of that group, and started building a small business or a small group of people that, it was all we could afford. But we licensed some software to get started, and then it was pretty quick. Within a year, we realized we were going to have to get good at building software. And so my job was to really find the talent and start building that foundation of software, which became our flagship product. We called Avid Invoice, but 10 years we've spent kind of building that code base up and making that a product that produces revenue and scales. We didn't know it at the time, but we were building software as a service, and multi-tenancy was just the way that we built it. But it wasn't like we sat around talking about cloud or SaaS, because those terms didn't really exist when we started the company in 2000. So we kind of watched Salesforce grow up, and we modeled what we were doing after them as much as we could find out about how they were building and what they were doing. And so that was kind of our big brother, if you will, to try to figure out what they were doing and mimic it. And once we got into the 10th year of the business, we started expanding into payments. And honestly, I don't think anybody really knew AvidXchange until we got into the payment space. That's when we became really a true fintech, and that's when we started growing and more of the marketing kicked in. We had MasterCard join our board in 2016. They became, an investor. They also license our product now and sell it to, some of the largest banks in the world. And so we now have them as kind of a partner that helps us build a new channel into the banking space. And so we have banks out there that resell our software, private labeled. We have a direct sales team, and then because we're in the accounting world, we're deeply embedded in a lot of ERP packages. Probably 150 plus accounting system packages that we've integrated into.
That's wonderful. So with a technological company that evolves so fast and in some planned ways and some unexpected ways, how do you do your thinking, your strategic planning, how do you look ahead?
Good question. We've been very, I would say, disciplined since the beginning to take time away from the day-to-day business. And by time away, I mean we physically take our kind of leadership team, pull them out of the business for a few days every quarter, and we pull back from the operational activity, and we really take a look at what are the big bets we're focused on, and are they still the right big bets? do we need to adjust what we call our Big Harry Audacious Goal, or BHAG? We've always had a BHAG, and if you're a successful company, you might start with a Big Harry Audacious Goal, and then you get 10 years into it, and you realize that, oh, okay, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're actually going to hit that, and then you realize it's not big enough, and so we've been fortunate enough to have to redefine our BHAG a few times because we just didn't, you don't know how you're going to get there, but once you start figuring it out, you realize, okay, it's no longer a Big, hairy, audacious goal. We have to redefine that. And when we got into the payment space, that's been, that's probably the area where we've been focusing on conquering that space over the last 10 years. But we do annual planning, same thing. We pull executives and we pull team leaders, and we take ideas and foster them during those sessions. And you're not allowed to take laptops in, and it's basically focus time. Probably the hardest thing to do is things like don't read your email while we're going through these sessions, because everybody's got their technology addictions, right? But we try to stay focused on that. We've done it every quarter since we started the business, never missed one. And then we actually will pull the entire company together after those sessions and just talk about where we're taking the company and things that we're learning, and just keeping everybody up to speed on what's going on.
So in looking at, I know some about AvidXchange, having interacted with several of you. And the one thing I'm always interested in these interactions is, in addition to the technical product, is how do you think and how do you interact with each other? And I always wonder to what extent this is deliberate, built in the way you create your goal, in the way you strategic plan, or this is just by nature of who you decide to hire. So let me rephrase that question a little bit. For us in university, whenever we do planning, we have 3 parallel missions: the education, the research, the engagement with the community. And we kind of navigate the 3 of them at the same time. For a technical company, what does your Big Harry Audacious Goal look like? Is it one goal that you're going for, or is it also multiple parallel paths?
What we try to do when we shape the goal is to really make it, it doesn't define the path. It's really a short statement that people can kind of get their head around. And so since we're in B2B payment space and we build software around the payment, we try to be inclusive of all the products that we're creating, because they all feed into the goal. But we're a network software business. In other words, we build software, but the value is actually created by the interaction between businesses that are buying goods and businesses that are supplying those goods. So we have this kind of network effect that I think it was inadvertent when we started payments, but it became obvious that was the value we were building. And being able to optimize that network means you have to add value to both sides, or you lose the audience, right? So if the buyers don't bring the suppliers into the network, then the network doesn't grow, it shrinks. And if the suppliers don't want to interact or do business through the network, that starts to shrink. And so for us to be successful, we have to tie it all together. And so our BHAG really focuses on all the software that is in that ecosystem. And basically, we want to be the leader in that space. So we're in B2B payments. We're doing software that facilitates the procurement side, the payment side. And then if you're on the supplier, it's receiving the cash side. So we try to include all those elements into our statement. And then when we measure how we're doing against that, there's a couple of elements that we're looking at that give us key indicators or leading indicators on how we're doing. It's the customer, how are we building customer satisfaction? How are we doing around customer satisfaction? So we have a focus on the customer. We obviously for-profit business, so we have to focus on our financial metrics, and so that's a quadrant. And then our teammates are, if you have a good product and good customers, but your teammates aren't happy, it's going to erode eventually, because the happiness of your teammates ultimately drives the happiness of your customer, which drives your finances. And so those are three areas where we put a lot of kind of focus. And then I would say wrapped up in that is also focus on process excellence and making sure that we're getting better on those operational elements of our business.
Very interesting. So related to that, I think last week the World Economic Forum released its latest report on the future of work. And we've been talking about the future of work for the last maybe 10 years, about how automation is going to change the landscape, how many jobs will disappear and new jobs will emerge. And not surprisingly, for now, or at least in the foreseeable horizon, the new jobs that will emerge are in technology and in healthcare.
Right.
So one of the, again, we've been seeing this coming, and COVID-19 has served as a huge accelerator of the trends that we were seeing before. And one of the conclusions, recommendations, observations of the report is that it becomes extremely essential for the success of businesses that they do upskilling, reskilling of their employees. The jobs are going to be disappearing under their feet much faster than they were before. And again, their prediction is that there will be more new jobs created than those that disappear. What's AvidXchange strategy around this? What do you do around upskilling, reskilling? How important is that for you?
That is a really good question. We pride ourselves at AvidXchange when we have events where we have somebody who's been in the business for some period of time, starts in an operational part of the business, but has some desire and aptitude to really continue learning. Kind of goes back to what I was trying to give as advice for your college students in the CCI, but you gotta kind of take your career into your own hands, but you want to be an employer that's helping to make it easier for the folks that want to get the new skills. So we'll stretch people. If they're in an operations job, we'll start stretching them to do more technology focused things if that's an interest that they have. And when we can take somebody out of an operational part of the business that really knows the operation well and also knows the technology that we've built for them to use or that we've purchased for them to use, there's no better person you can actually move into a technology field than somebody who understands the operation and the customer. It's an element that coming out of, a computer science major or any of your more technical majors, you may have that foundation for the technology, but you have to get into business and learn about the customer and what problems you're solving. And so for me, it creates diversity in my team, diversity in thought, when I can pull somebody into a technical role that's been in less technical but more operations role. So we're trying to make sure we give tools to those folks. So we do things like online training. We use tools like Pluralsight and LinkedIn Learning. That's more of a self-paced, go online and learn at your own pace. And so we give access to tools to our teammates like that. Within our technology field, we're partnering with UNCC on a couple initiatives that we're working to get ramped up. But those will be initiatives where, with the partnership, UNCC will actually be helping upskill some of those folks that are showing interest. So that would be an investment in those teammates. Same idea. Best teammate you can get in a technology field is somebody who understands the business and the customer and has the aptitude and really the attitude to want to learn. And I think we're looking for more opportunities where we can partner with, companies or institutions like UNCC. And, I think we also have quite a few folks who've taken advantage of packages where we'll help them pay for a degree if they want to go back to school. Same type of concept.
That's the best argument I've ever heard for upskilling and how you really get the most benefits for the employee and for yourself by upskilling people from the operational side.
Yeah, I think we've actually sent a couple of non-traditional students your way, to use your definition.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I also know that social responsibility is something that is extremely important for AvidXchange, and that keep it very broad like that, and let you pick whatever you want to talk about in terms of our responsibility to our community, to society in general.
Yeah, we created a foundation. I think it was 2007 when Hurricane Katrina had devastated some of our states in the South, and we, a lot of kids were out of school, and so I think we used that as an opportunity to really think about social responsibility and what's our role at AvidXchange. And we were still a small company back then, but I recall almost every employee packing kids' backpacks with supplies and shipping those out. And we spent, weekends. People came in and used their weekends to help do that, and that really created what we call the AvidXchange Foundation. And we've always tried to keep that foundation funded since that 2007 event. And it's just gotten bigger and bigger since we've become more successful. Now, there's not a Monday. We do our regular company Monday meetings where we talk about what's going on in the company. And, every month we're talking about new events that we're sponsoring with that foundation. And the focus has always been, since the Katrina, it's always had some element of helping kids in need. And we've tried to focus on that, I think, because the thought is, I can't remember a time where we didn't have a shortage of high-tech employees. There's always been a shortage of candidates for high-tech positions. You can't just solve that all of a sudden. That has to be solved at the lowest level of education so that we can start building more people in STEM and getting them ready for college education in computer science, or even certification programs. Things like that are helpful as well. But, it's hard to do that just all of a sudden. So you have to work with people. You have to work with young kids and start to get them ready for that. So we've tried to have a focus on that since the beginning. I think that's evolved now. We as a company are getting to the size where you can't be successful in a business our size and trying to do what we're doing if you don't have some diversity in the team. And so when we started it, like I said, it was a small group of people. I think we were all like-minded, looked alike, and we didn't think much about it. As you got bigger, you can't be successful if you're not being inclusive and creating a diverse workforce. And so I think there's multiple elements about social responsibility, but it started with the foundation. And I would say about 3 or 4 years ago, we really had an intentional focus to start focusing more on diversity and inclusion and what does that mean? And it starts with some education. And so we started that in probably 2016, 2017. And that's continued to evolve into a program that we call Real Exchanges. And it's kind of a voluntary program, but the program, essentially, we talk about hard social topics, and we talk about, what does it mean to be a person of color in the U.S. And so or transgender, or you name it. I mean, the first time I went into one of these sessions, it was a little bit, it was uncomfortable. Like, those conversations can get extremely uncomfortable, especially, just my background, I never have to think about it as much. And so just understanding that not everybody has your experience. And I think in 2017, we added a leader to the company, Steve Bohm, who was passionate about kind of inserting this diversity inclusion concept into the business, and I'm really thankful to have him kind of mentor us through that. But he started passing out some of these books around. A book called Blindspot, and the book really helps explain the science behind, hey, it's not intentional, but you're an element of your experiences, and those experiences create unconditional or biases in the way you think or the way you associate things. That it's not like it's a bad thing. It's just the way our brains work. We tend to associate things automatically and within a split second. And the experiences you had in life control those associations. And so that's kind of the science of it. And that helps diffuse the conversation a little bit, because it makes people realize that, okay, this is not intentional necessarily. I don't have thoughts like that because I'm a bad person, but it's more about just the way the brain works. So if you're starting at that foundation, it becomes easier to create a safe space to have some of these really uncomfortable conversations, but they're important. If you look at what's happened in the country with all the unrest this year, I mean, we still have we have a lot of work ahead of us as a country. And so we want to be, I'm kind of answering your question the long way around, but we want to make sure that we're part of that social change. And we want to make sure that as we're hiring people into the company, it's grounded in these types of understanding. And so an example of a practice that we've kind of adopted within the last few years is, if you're hiring for a director and above type of candidate, who's doing your interviewing? Who's on your interview panel? Do you have diverse thought when you're getting feedback about a leadership position that you're filling? And it's changed the way I think about it. And it's not like I've gone through this with AvidXchange over the last 3 years and suddenly I'm fixed and I understand it. And it's not like that. It's a journey. And I think we're all kind of somewhere on a maturity cycle in that journey. And I think I'm at the beginning. So I'm not trying to sound, holier than thou or anything. It's just, I think it's an important thing for us as a country to think about. So.
Thank you. You invited us a couple of weeks ago to an internal event about bias. And I have to say that I was extremely impressed by the level of openness and how safe AvidXchange employees felt like discussing these things. And you mentioned the fact that you hired a leader who actually championed this. And that is over and over, I see how important it is. It gives everybody's, it signals that this is something that is important for us, and this is something that we must discuss, and it's not pointing the finger at anybody.
Right.
So in terms of acceleration, we said that the COVID-19, that the race unrest that is happening in the summer, the global warming, all of these are accelerators of trends that are already happening. And it incomes to all of us to really hear these signals and decide to respond accordingly, to respond in a way that is commensurate with the urgency of the times. What question do you think we should be asking that we may not be in the public sphere right now, or should we? How do we move from the incremental to the big hairy goal, as you mentioned? What should we be doing differently? I know you may not have the answer ready for this, but I just wanted to put it out there.
That is a big, heavy question. One of the things kind of, and I don't mean to harp on this, but I think one of the things that happened at AvidXchange this year, for me personally, was, watching the unrest that was happening with, the whole police brutality conversation, and you have different people that receive that information very differently, and it really goes back to the experiences that people have had growing up. And you just commented about joining us through one of those real exchanges. I think they're powerful virtually, but they're much more powerful when you can do them in person. That's a really hard thing to do virtually, but we've kept doing those. What I've had to compensate with to go get a little deeper is to go to teammates that don't look like me and didn't have the background that I did, and just try to find a safe way to have some of those conversations in more of a virtual one-on-one session. And that for me, because, watching the unrest kind of unfold, I realized immediately that I don't understand what's going on. And I'm somebody who's trying to probably have some understanding, and it just doesn't make sense when you see that level of unrest to me. So I've tried to dig a little deeper with folks one-on-one and have some of those conversations. I'll be the first to say that I'm still, I still have discomfort when I'm having those conversations. And so it's a little bit of a thing that you have to practice. But as a country, I don't think we understand each other. And I think we have to find a way to probably do better. It's not going to go away. People aren't going to just start feeling differently tomorrow. There's obviously a huge gap in how people are perceiving the events. And, I don't know how we do that without some dialogue and some civil dialogue. Honestly, I think it starts one person at a time. So I think anybody watching this probably, we all have some responsibility to dig a little deeper and find out what's going on that we don't understand. Just because we don't understand it doesn't mean it's not real to somebody.
Thank you. And it may have been unfair to throw that question at you. And
yeah, it was a little bit. It's good though. I'm glad you asked that question, honestly.
I think it's, and again, one of the reasons I gifted it with you, it's the question I wake up with every morning. What should we be doing differently? And and again, the incremental is no longer sufficient. And it happens at the individual level. It happens at the institutional level. It happens at the company level. And maybe one of my hidden agendas there is to say, AvidXchange cannot do it alone. UNC Charlotte cannot do it alone. We all need to help stimulate each other's thinking to figure out how do we move this. And
right.
And I know that as an educational institution, we have a huge responsibility. We are supposed to help to be the sense makers, but also we're educating the next generations. How do we make sure that we graduate people who are better equipped than us to handle these things?
Right. Yeah, I think the other kind of learning for me that I think was eye-opening when we started having some of these conversations at AvidXchanges. If you just focus on the numbers and diversity and trying to get, the diversity numbers up, that really can backfire too, because then you've got a diverse team, but if you're not listening to them or you're not empowering them to make decisions, then you really are probably doing less service than you think. So we try not to make it about kind of numbers or any of that. It's more about just the fabric of how we work with one another and how we think about not just adding diverse team members, but also how we make sure people are heard and included in the conversation. Because last thing you want to do is have a bunch of diverse people come in and decide it's not a welcoming environment. And stronger companies are more diverse. I mean, the facts are there, the data there. If you want to have a strong company, you need to have diversity. And I think initially that might have been how we were thinking about it. We've got to do this. But once you get into it, you realize there's more of a social responsibility to it than maybe it looked like on the surface, because there's a whole group of people that just aren't treated fairly or disenfranchised in certain ways. And it's subtle and it's not intentional. So I can't emphasize that enough. I don't think it's always intentional anyway. I think a lot of it is just, it's unconscious kind of wiring in the brain. And once you start shining some light on it, it becomes easier for people to ask themselves questions. Okay, why am I making this decision, or why am I taking this feedback? So I think just you can add that one critical element into the way you're thinking. I think that's a big win.
I fully agree. And you mentioned that it's hardwired in the brain. And as technology companies, technology educators, we have a huge responsibility in this, in the sense that what is so far higher than the brain, we're making it wired in the brain. We're making it wired in the technology as well.
Right.
I heard a talk yesterday where somebody mentioned credit rating and how much credit rating is biased, in the sense that it just keeps perpetuating whatever inequity you start with. And the thought never occurred to me. And here's some very simple formula, very simple algorithm that you apply. And you don't realize that somebody who doesn't have a degree, who comes from a low socioeconomic family, will have hard time gaining that credit that will allow them then to go to the next step. So I know that for us, for CCI, that social responsibility and the role that technology plays in it is something that is extremely important to us. And it is still thinking in progress. How do we educate differently? How do we do research differently? How do we untangle all of these things and say, yes, we're designing technology, but technology that is not perpetuating these inequities? Chris, anything you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask you?
Really good questions. I think it's a good panel. If there's just a parting element, I would like to just say thank you, first of all, for giving me the opportunity to continue working with the university. Looking forward to continued partnership with AvidXchange and UNCC. And, I look forward to continuing getting good candidates out of your program as well. And so it's an exciting time to be in this field. And I think you highlighted this a couple of times. There's since my beginning into this career space, there's always been a shortage, and it's only getting worse. And it's very lucrative. So people just should get in and go head first, dive into it, try to be the best you can at learning, and take advantage of the time we're in, because technology is only becoming more important, especially with COVID. We've seen our business grow. We've added more engineers. We're growing while some businesses are kind of struggling through this. But I just can't emphasize enough. Get in there, get your degree, but learn as much as you possibly can. And I think you'll find that there's plenty of opportunity when you exit your degree program, for sure.
Thank you so much, Chris. We're very proud of our alumni, very proud of you. And also your story is very inspiring. And working with you, with AvidXchange, has been very rewarding. I learned from you and from how you run a well-focused company on doing good in society is extremely inspiring for us. So wonderful having you as alumnus, having AvidXchange as a partner.
Thank you. Same here. Appreciate it.